Welcome to New Atlas Live. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me, as always, is Angelo Giuliano. Hello, Angelo. How are you today?
Good, Brian. Good, Brian. It's Saturday night. As always, we always say that we should try to keep it casual, just chill out a little bit. We are to always talk about serious stuff, and we always end up like too serious because it's serious topics. But I think we have some interesting information here that we want to share. You want to give maybe a few points about what you want to cover tonight, Brian.
Absolutely. So recently, we've heard President-elect Donald Trump, before he even steps foot into office, talking about seizing the Panama Canal, talking about basically annexing Greenland, I think it could be an exaggeration, but at the end of the day, he is talking about exerting control over the Panama Canal one way or the other, at a minimum, expanding already existing U.S. military assets in Greenland. And I've heard it argued that this is a way of kind of walking back away from global empire and kind of fortifying the continental United States. The problem is that the neoconservative agenda spanning decades hasn't been one or the other. It has always been both. It has always been about utterly dominating all of North America, Central and South America, and everything from this side of the planet, or that side of the planet, to Europe and beyond. So when we talk about where the U.S. is focused, they're focused on absolutely everything near and abroad. Now, just a real quick preview of the details we're going to get into. This is not about walking away from war with Russia or war with China. This is actually a step toward enhancing America's position ahead of a war with either or both. And we'll just start here, looking at where Greenland is on the map. Okay, and these routes here, these are the northern routes that Russia is developing, and China is also interested in developing, to kind of sidestep what you and I have talked about for a very long time, Angelo. The U.S. threatening, say, the Strait of Malacca, threatening the Suez Canal, threatening the Panama Canal. This is Russia and China looking for ways of trading in areas out of the reach of the U.S. military and its ability to target shipping, maritime shipping. And so what expanded U.S. military presence in Greenland is going to do is force Russia to respond. As a matter of fact, we have some good documents lined up that you and I were reading before the show. But I want to go back to this one, this classic, Extending Russia. Would you be surprised to find out that in this document, Extending Russia, the Arctic is mentioned many times? This is everyone can download this for free online. And right here, under maritime measures, more aggressive U.S. and allied patrolling near Russian naval base areas could cause Russia to adopt expensive countermeasures. With limited access to the open sea, Russia would be sensitive to threats posed to these areas, particularly the Arctic, exactly where the U.S. would be involving itself in if it expanded its presence in Greenland or subordinated Greenland to the United States. Home of its nuclear ballistic missile submarine fleet and the Baltic and Black Seas. And we know that the United States is active in all of these areas. And actually, I have a whole bunch of quotes that maybe we can go over, but it's basically the same thing. Expanding U.S. military and NATO military presence in the Arctic to force Russia to respond. And overall, together with everything the U.S. is doing everywhere else around the globe to Russia along its periphery, overextend Russia, which is literally the title of the document, is Extending Russia. So that's just Greenland just getting started. Panama is a very similar story. Panama is about very overtly taking control of one of the major choke points the U.S. has been developing to just completely strangle Chinese maritime trade worldwide. Panama is one, Suez is another, the Middle East in general is another. the Strait of Malacca, the South China Sea. Angelo, what are your initial thoughts on all of this when you heard about President-elect Trump, not even in office yet, talking about this? What were the first things that came to your mind?
Well, I think we need to take this extremely seriously. Well, the attempt by the U.S. to strike a deal with Denmark over Greenland it was not from yesterday. It's been hundreds of years that the U.S. is actually trying to put its hands on Greenland. And I think we need to really understand, just to give a few figures, there are 50,000 natives from Greenland, and it's been attached to Denmark for a long time. It's a colony, so basically it should claim independence. They actually they could claim under the law, that Danish law, they could claim independence. And when you look at the polls, there's a large majority, probably over 70% of people in Greenland, that they want independence. Now, when you look at the whole economy of Greenland, it's living out of fishing, and it's extremely poor. It's living out of subventions from Greenland, which is not a rich country. It's heavy subventions, heavy help that it's a big weight for Danish economy. It's $500 million a year. Now you have to ask the questions: why you have so much spending for land, which is extremely Greenland is extremely rich in oil, gas, and mining. Well, guess what? The US and the West, the collective West, has been investing massively into NGOs that has been actually blocking any development when it comes to Greenland. So that is very similar to what they've been trying to do in Africa, basically denying any development under the pretext of, we have human rights NGOs, we have animal protection NGOs, and we have climate change NGOs. But in reality, when you really look at this, it's actually the purpose is not about, we care about Greenland and we care about climate change and so on. The purpose is to how we can keep Greenland underdeveloped, because it's not working on the benefit of people living in Greenland. If you are poor in Greenland and you want independence, well, you need to actually achieve financial independence first. Now, by keeping them extremely poor, you control them much better. And I will draw the parallel to, remember in the US, you had those reserves, Indians reserves. What did they do to actually completely contain them and actually destroy their whole culture? You would put them in small reserves and just give them survival money, and for doing nothing. And basically, they turn into a nation of alcoholic drug addicts. And I'm not looking down on those populations, but it is the worst you could do, is to take away completely all their dignity. So now it's a two-step for the US, how they can actually put their hands on Greenland. First thing is that they've been preparing this for a long time. They've been investing to NGOs, and they've been actually spending massive amount of money through USAID. USAID has different programs. One of the programs of USAID in Greenland is to do teacher training. So imagine the US doing teacher training in Greenland. What's the purpose? Well, basically, it's indoctrination of a whole nation, especially pushing for self-determination. But in this case, when it's financed by the US, it's actually indoctrination. It's not going to be for the benefit of local indigenous. So USAID, and then you have all those climate change NGOs just to make sure that they buy politicians, because those NGOs becomes an economy in itself in a small nation of 50,000 people. They're putting money there and they're buying allegiance of those politicians, local politicians. You don't need much. You need just to, on 50,000 people, how many people vote? Maybe 30,000, right? The kids don't vote. Now you need a few thousand votes, and you buy politicians, you buy allegiance. So the first step would be having Denmark to declare, Greenland to declare independence. And the second step would be to put local people into a position that, maybe we lift up all those restrictions from those NGOs, and we give you a few $1 billion, and we get access to all your resources. That's how they could do. Imagine if you are from Greenland, they offer you $100,000 per person just to, and then you get a green card too. Just that's easy, and that's a steal. But why would they be in that position? Because they have been making sure that absolutely no development would be possible. And this is why the article I put on the tweet is about 140 NGOs managing to get a moratorium on any development on the natural resources of Greenland, meaning that for a certain period of time, nothing can happen in Greenland. And that's for the benefit of who? Not people from Greenland, for the US. So in this plan, basically, the US could not actually attack Greenland or take over Greenland. It needs first Greenland to declare independence. Now, and then later, it's going to be only a relationship between the US and Greenland, because Denmark is a NATO ally. You couldn't go directly confrontational with Denmark. So you see, so it's interesting. Greenland, when you look and maybe we're going to cover that on the paper you showed me just before. This is on the Greenland is part of the Arctic Council through Denmark, and it's on the route of the Arctic route, which is an alternative. It's part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And for China, it's very strategic because it's a good way to bypass the Malacca Strait and all those places around the world where the US could actually do a blockade. And what are the places? There's Greenland, there's the Panama Canal. So you see the coincidence. Trump is coming together with those two elements, Panama Canal and Greenland. So this is a red flag, especially knowing that the Trump administration is extremely xenophobic and is actually completely shifting towards China. The people, all the brains there, the Colby and all the people, actually the thinkers that actually are giving all the policies are for the shift towards China. And this is the major change we are going to see. But this is not going to be Hawk Biden to dovish Trump. No. It's just a different approach, but a much more concentration towards China. It's the Mersheimer school, and I advise people really to look into Mersheimer. Mersheimer is excellent when it comes to Ukraine, but it is actually, it's not because he's about peace. He's calculating that for him, it makes more sense to go more towards China and be confrontational towards China, and the Russia issue can wait. It's just a different approach, different strategy, but it's extremely cold approach. So there's no coincidence. So if you still think that Trump is going to be dovish, well, wake up. You really need to wake up. And those are red flags. And
Yes.
it doesn't mean that they are going to put their hands on Greenland tomorrow, but they are planting the seeds.
Absolutely. And speaking about how all of this is ultimately aimed at China, which includes the proxy war against Russia, we have a surprise guest right here. Carl.
Hey, Carl.
Welcome.
Hey, Angelo. Hey, Brian.
What's the first thing that went through your mind when you heard Donald Trump talk about Greenland and Panama?
Well, initially I thought it was a joke. We all know Trump talk about a lot of things. He's all about hot air. But now that I look into it, it looks like it's not just Trump, because we all know the U.S. deep state. They are the ones who actually has a continuous, consistent foreign policy to dominate and to ensure American primacy. And so I just saw this article from Reuters. This just from out a couple of days ago. It says U.S. lobby Greenland rare earth developer Tam Breeze not to sell to China. Notice this is not Trump. Trump is not president yet. This is the Biden administration telling a Greenland company, no, you better not to sell to China, because one of the importance about Greenland is it has a large reserve of critical minerals outside of China. And for US, it became important because now that China has banned critical mineral export to the United States in response to the U.S. chip sanction on China, now they're looking to develop alternative sources for these critical minerals, including gallium. And the Chinese company negotiated a deal with Greenland company Breeze, but America came in and said, no, don't do it. It's a national security threat. And I mean, if America really wanted to compete with China, they could just put down the money, just make a better offer. That's what would happen in a free market system, right? You put a higher bid, but instead they put a lot of pressure on the company not to sell, and then they put together they push a U.S. company to make the purchase for actually bought the company the Greenland company for much less than what China had offered. So this is just robbery now. This is not like we know U.S. government don't believe in free market anyway, but they are forcing this Greenland company essentially to sell to American company. Yet, given the way the current American capitalism is, there's very unlikely chance that this reserve might actually get developed. So if the American investment brings job development to Greenland, that would be good for the Greenlanders. But what United States is doing is acting as spoilers to block China from making a higher bid, and they buy it, and they're probably not just gonna sit on it and not develop it because, according to all sort of studies, currently it's economically unfeasible to operate a commercial operation, or at least by the American company standards. So very likely they're just trying to block China purchase of this company just out of spite. And this also leads me to think that the Trump plan for acquiring Greenland, this is not just Trump. This is a well thought out plan, because as Brian already said, Greenland set a very strategic location, and now especially with the polar ice is melting, now the Arctic sea route is opened up, and a lot of with the ice receding.
Carl seems to have frozen. Well, while we wait for Carl to come back, I just want to make 2 points. This article that Carl pointed out, they're talking about Lockheed, Raytheon, and Boeing. So the military-industrial complex is involved, which means this is why it's happening under Biden right now, and and Trump is openly saying it will continue under his administration. And Angelo, something that you had pointed out, and this was something you shared on Twitter. I highly suggest everyone follow Angelo on Twitter, or X. I'm sorry, X. You were pointing out WikiLeaks U.S. diplomatic cables talking about encouraging separatism or independence on Greenland, in Greenland, and how this stretches back years and years and years. So this is not something that just floated into President-elect Donald Trump's head today. This isn't part of some unique Trump strategy for his presidency. This is continuity of agenda. This is something that has been worked on for years and years. As Carl just pointed out, it has to do with resources. As we have showed you on the map, it has to do with strategic locations and enhancing America's position ahead of a confrontation with both Russia and China. Angelo, is there anything you want to, now that you see this Reuters article, I'll share the link in the chat for everybody here, the archived version. Any additional, while we wait for Carl to try to get back on here?
Carl was just saying before, that's the strategy of a lot of corporation, mining corporation. What they do is that they put their hands into the mining, and actually it's what we call hoarding. So they put their hands there, but as a control, but they don't have an intention of developing. So basically you maintain the price high, and the idea is just to contain the country you're in. So that's one of the strategies. And I just want to go back to the WikiLeaks. Well, Carl is there. Just the WikiLeaks, actually, that message, that telegram in WikiLeaks says clearly, that was in 1978. It says, well, the movement for self-determination, independence is going according to plan. This is the State Department. So basically, they say that the plan of declaring independence is going according to our goal or objective. I give back to to Carl. You were cut. I don't know where you left it, but you just froze.
Oh, it's my internet. I live in a Bali jungle, unfortunately, so I don't even get 5G. The Bali actually have 5G built by Huawei, but that's only for the center urban area. But I don't like people, so I live in the boondocks. This is what we have to deal with. So what I was saying is, I think the plan to take over Greenland is premeditated because with the polar ice melting, climate change actually favors Russia because Russia has a long Arctic coastline, and what the United States is trying to do is trying to reach parity with Russia. Greenland and Iceland, they sit on what's called like the important passageways. The official U.S. national security reason is, we need to take over Greenland so we can block Russian submarines from coming to North America. But really, it's more like Brian has mentioned. This is more to maintain a strategic stranglehold on the new Arctic shipping that's been developing between China and Europe, because the Arctic route actually means there will be reduced travel time from China to Europe. And it goes through a lot of the waters that currently not being controlled by United, like for example, United States, U.S. Navy has a hard boner for blocking Strait of Malacca. They repeatedly said that. But Arctic sea route is such that China can travel mostly through friendly waters, which means along Russia coastway. So what United States is trying to do is, again, they're trying to play the spoiler role by acquiring Greenland and Canada. So then they can, just like what they currently do in South China Sea, threaten China's vital sea lanes. Now they can similarly threaten the Arctic sea route that's going to open up. And of course, it's to build up even more military presence. U.S. already have a space base in Greenland. Well, they call it space base, but it actually has the sensors for monitoring missile launches and stuff. So, and we don't really know what else they have going on there. And this is just gonna they're just trying to capitalize on climate change, which Trump administration don't believe in, but they're going to monetize it because they see a business opportunity and they see a strategic opportunity. So I'm done with my rant.
Okay, so I mean, I think all three of us are in agreement that this has been going on for a while. This is part of continuity of agenda. The U.S. As established special interests do not accept the concept of peer or near peer nations. They do not want anyone. They don't want to cooperate with a peer or near peer competitor. They don't want to compete. They just want to eliminate them. And so that is what all of this is a continuation of other ongoing strategies. Now, as I was showing before, we have all of these quotes inside the Rand Corporation extending Russia, talking about getting in the Arctic, forcing Russia to react, forcing them to spend resources and transfer military equipment to the Arctic to respond to it, which is, again, part of the same strategy that was used to draw Russia into a conflict in Ukraine. But remember, the first Trump administration began arming Ukraine to help precipitate that conflict in the first place. People have to filter out the left-right political rhetoric in American politics and see the continuity of agenda that continues no matter who gets voted into office in the White House or Congress. There was another one. There was this one was scary, and there's another one too that I was showing Angelo before the show. This is from the ironically named Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and the title of their article is "Stranglehold: The Context, Conduct, and Consequences of an American Naval Blockade of China." And in this article, they talk about if Burma, also known as Myanmar, refuses to cooperate with the U.S. in terms of just cutting China off and isolating it, the U.S. could militarily strike the Sino-Burmese oil and natural gas pipeline. Now, this was all the way back in 2013. Would you be surprised to know that U.S. armed and backed militants in Myanmar are attacking the Sino-Burmese pipeline right now, every year, for years now? So the U.S. isn't just thinking about these plans, they are implementing it. They're not using their own military to do this. They're using proxies, just like they did in Syria. And this is like I said, we have to zoom out of these individual conflicts and see the big picture, how this is all ultimately aimed at China. And Russia is a priority because Russia, as it mentions in this Carnegie Endowment for International Peace article, Russia can help relieve attempts by the U.S. to blockade China because it has pipelines going directly into China. The U.S. cannot bomb them. They cannot interdict them. They cannot blockade Russian gas from going from Russia straight into China. So this is why the U.S. is obsessed with dividing and destroying Russia to thus fully isolate China. So there's a step-by-step process. That's how I see it. Angelo and then Carl, how do you see it? Do you see the big picture in this way, or am I missing something?
Well, maybe I'd like to touch upon what are the strategies. I mean, basically, here we are talking about the blockade and the purpose of a blockade, and maybe we can draw a parallel to Pearl Harbor, actually the confrontation the U.S. had with Japan. The aggression back then was towards Japan, was create a blockade and to asphyxiate Japan's economy. And Japan had no choice but to actually attack Pearl Harbor. So what they're trying to do here with China is a bit similar. They think that they can actually asphyxiate Chinese economy by blocking the Malacca Strait and all the routes that are strategic for China. And this actually, the countermeasure of China was to develop the Belt and Road Initiative and alternative routes. This is why China, it's been decades that it's been already preparing for this. So it's important. So this is one way, the blockade, and it would be actually not on the shore of China, but further, where China doesn't have power projection. You see, the weakness of China is power projection. China doesn't have army base abroad, and it cannot project power. The only way it can do is probably through those hypersonic missiles, but it's very limited. It cannot, it doesn't have army bases abroad. The other ways is around China to use proxies. So we have the Philippines. There are ways to create tensions between Taiwan and China, and maybe we can mention this maybe later, but maybe through a coup in Taiwan, similar to what happened in South Korea, declaring of martial law. And actually, once you do that, you have, it's a cycle of escalation. Then you have South Korea, maybe the same as what they tried to do. You create a false flag, and de facto U.S. Army is in charge of South Korean army, and then draw Japan into this war because there's a trilateral alliance: South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. And Japan has actually reinterpreted its constitution, so basically can go into a confrontation. And in addition to that, I would say the question mark is the Philippines. The Philippines is being drawn into confrontation with China, with now this administration, which is the Zelensky or Juan Guaido's administration in Philippines, which is completely, a U.S. puppet, which is becoming dangerous. So there are many ways that the U.S. could actually go against China. This, in addition to that, we have those many fronts we see. You mentioned just before Myanmar. There are tensions there. It's not, those are all related to China. There's Baluchistan In Pakistan, they're trying to disrupt the Belt and Road Initiative. It's on many, many different fronts. So, and as you said just before, it doesn't matter Biden or Trump. People don't be fooled, really. It's just cosmetic. What we are seeing we're here with Trump or Biden's just cosmetic. One was about diversity, and one is more conservative. But ultimately, they're working for the U.S. empire.
I agree with your assessment, Angelo, but I'm more optimistic because the incompetence of United States government to carry out its plans. We've seen this in Iraq, right? They had a grand plan going into Iraq, as outlined by Alan Greenspan in his memoir. He said, well, we didn't go there to grab the oil exactly, but we went there trying to dictate the flow of oil. Because even back in 2003, they saw that China became more dependent on oil import from the Gulf region. So they want to go to establish American base in Iraq so they can dictate who will get that oil. And well, how did that work out? I mean, it worked out horribly for the Iraqi people, but it also didn't help the American prestige. The American power was pretty much was wasted on this Great War on Terror. Well, it did fatten the pockets of the military-industrial complex, which is also what it's designed to do, is to transfer money from the taxpayer tax bases of Europe and America and go into the transnational elite, transnational security elite, just like Assange has pointed out. That's why he was prosecuted. But the other part, they're part of the grand plan, the grand chessboard, as Zabrinsky would like to say. They're not very competent in carrying out those grand plans. I thought about the U.S. blockade on Malacca Strait. I just don't see how they can carry it out because, first of all, they never practiced it. And this is one of the most busy shipping lane in the world. Right now, the Strait of Malacca is not just trade from China, because China trades with the rest of the world through Strait of Malacca. So they were essentially blockading the rest of the world, and certainly all of the East Asia. And it's the United States not just declaring war against China in that case. The United States will be war against the entire world. So I don't see how that could be politically feasible. And also, government in Japan and South Korea, as much as they're vassals of the United States, they still have an interest of self-preservation. Because if a war is to fought around Taiwan Strait or anywhere in Western Pacific, all the economies in East Asia will be devastated. Because if the trilateral military alliance of South Korea, Japan, and United States gets dragged into a conflict with China, they're all the American bases there will be targeted. They will be targeted by Chinese missiles. But the end result is all the economies in East Asia will be devastated. Nobody wants to see that. I mean, most countries in the East Asia, they don't want war. They want continued trade. I mean, the right wing in Japan, they are aligned with United States because they're scared of the rise of China. But at the end of the day, they still don't want a war in their neighborhood because Japan could be devastated. U.S. can afford to have a war in East Asia because U.S. homeland is far away. That's why U.S. is creating all these provocation, creating all these tensions. But the people in East Asia, they actually have a stake in this. They don't want war. So this is one thing on China's advantage. China's side. What China's advantage is their interest is aligned to preserve peace and stability in the region. And U.S. have come up with all these crazy plans all the time. I'm in Bali, Indonesia. Back in 1958, CIA used to run planes from Taiwan to bomb oil fields in Indonesia, right? I mean, like, this seems like a time so far gone. But despite all these machinations, right now, currently, all the Southeast Asia is deepening their economic ties with China, because just by the sheer gravitational pull of the Chinese economy, China is the largest foreign investor in all the Southeast Asian nations, maybe with the exception of the Philippines, and that's because Bongbong Marcos just self-sabotaged by declaring Chinese investment not welcome. And this is why I'm optimistic, because I'm optimistic the U.S. is going to fuck this up. I know they have a plan to screw China. They had this plan for a long time, but I feel I can count on them to screw it up again. What do you think?
Although I would say I used to believe that, and in the lead up to the special military operation in Ukraine, I was almost certain that Europe would pivot away from the United States, because just like you say, for East Asia, it was in Europe's best interest for peace and stability. And they were getting cheap energy from Russia. They were going to get even more with Nord Stream 2 coming online. But because of the U.S. political capture of Europe, they ended up convincing the governments, the administrations, and even to a degree the population, brainwashing them through media, that no, going to war with Russia is in your best interest. You're going to take a hit economically. Your energy prices are going to go up. Your industry will not be competitive, probably indefinitely, but it's worth it because Russia bad. And haven't they been singing the tune China bad all around the world, including here in Asia, for years and years? And they spend millions of dollars. The U.S. government, through the NED and other organizations, agencies, spend millions and millions of dollars trying to poison the people here in Asia against their own best interests, which includes doing business with China and maintaining peace and stability in the region. So that's what I worry about. I worry about America's very well-practiced, effective ability to turn people against their own best interests and getting them. Think about Ukraine. Nothing that Ukraine is doing right now is in their own best interest, and yet they've convinced the government, is politically captured and a client regime, but also the population to just die in droves just to spite Russia. It's not going to save Ukraine. This is what I worry will happen with the Philippines, the island province of Taiwan, at least these two areas, and possibly more. Because the problem here is I see business leaders in Asia, here in Southeast Asia, they think like you think, Carl. They can see how obvious that is. And the problem is they don't see the NED and the way the U.S. Invasively infects a society. They don't see it as national security threat that it actually is. And by the time they do, like Bangladesh, it's too late. You're already on a helicopter flying off somewhere because they took your country out from under you. So this is what I worry about. I want to bring up one more thing and then hand it over to Angelo. Just to show people, this isn't one isolated paper that I dug up from wherever. There's also this from the National Defense University. This was from 2012. And I remember covering this back in the day, many papers like this about blockading China. So this is called offshore control. And they're, just like Angelo said earlier in the program, China is not able to project military power globally. Its military is to defend China only. And even though the Western media portrays China as a national security threat to the entire globe, in U.S. policy papers, they admit that it cannot, even if it wanted to, it cannot. So this is called Offshore Control, Proposed Strategy for an Unlikely Conflict. And then there's a whole section on page 5 of the PDF where they talk about how easy it is to identify ships carrying hydrocarbons to China, but also ships carrying Chinese goods to export partners. How easy it is. And China would respond by rerouting, but the only possibilities are the Panama Canal and the Strait of Magellan. And so they're talking about U.S. blockades, China trying to reroute it through the Panama Canal. But wouldn't you know that the Trump administration is talking about seizing control of the Panama Canal just at this time, just like with Greenland, the timing, just as this conflict between the U.S., Russia, and China is reaching a critical point. They're openly talking about doing this. Angelo, and then Carl, I'd like to hear your.
Why don't you finish to read that article? Because the line, the remaining line, actually mentions the ice is melting, and the northern route could be. You forgot about that. That's actually
Yes.
touching upon Greenland. So basically,
Yes.
and this is a paper of 2012, right? That's a long time ago. 13 years ago, they were already talking about Panama Canal, and here they don't mention Greenland by definition. northern route. This is Greenland.
Yes. So yes, that's a good point, Angelo. So people, if you cannot see it on the screen, and I'm going to drop the link in the comment section also. It says these ships are also, they're talking about ships carrying Chinese exports. These are the easiest to track and divert. Naturally, China would respond by rerouting. The only possibility are the Panama Canal and the Strait of Magellan, or if polar ice melts continues, the northern route. U.S. assets can control all of these routes, but only if they were to exert control over Panama, and only if they position their military assets in the Arctic, say in Greenland.
Yeah, Brian, I just want to add up on that's related to the fact that you can turn countries against their own interests. The single example of Ukraine that's one of the best examples. He came into power and he had a huge approval rating because he promised to. He said, Russians are brothers, and he was actually on a platform of peace. Everything, people voted for him because he said, the first thing I'm going to do is sit down with Putin and I'm going to bring an end, and it's going to be peace. And actually he lied. He was a US puppet all along. In reality, if you really look at how many people were backing him into this coup, into Maidan and so on, we are talking about maybe 10,000 extremely radical. You don't need to have even 1% of the support of a coup. But once you are into a martial law, you do whatever you want. So it's really important to look at South Korea, an escalation. They tried to do a false flag operation, basically using saying, well, the North Koreans, they attacked us, and actually de facto you need to turn into like martial law. And what happens is that martial law, you have some time between the time you declare martial law to the time that it needs to be approved by the Legislative Council. But within the time that you enact the martial law and it's approved, you can do so much damage that it's irreversible. The coup, the martial law is irreversible. You're into war. How can you track back? Now, I want to go back to Taiwan. You know, the DPP, what they did, the first thing, they actually gave support to Yoon, President Yoon of South Korea. They say, oh, that's great. And that's the DPP. Remember, DPP, they came into power because they were demonized in the Kuomintang. They say the white terror, because Kuomintang was ruling the island under martial law until 1987. So you have the DPP that was actually giving support to a coup. And in addition to that, you see, in Taiwan, it's like this. The process is you can declare martial law, but the legislative yuan has 30 days to oppose it. Basically, you have 30 days. So within 30 days, a lot of damage can be done. Now, Kuomintang is coming back and saying, you know what, 30 days is too much. It's outdated. We need to bring it back to 24 hours. Why they do this? The timing tells a lot, because Kuomintang knows that there is a possibility that DPP declares martial law under false flag, and it becomes irreversible. Guess what? DPP doesn't want that, and that's a red flag. And I would turn it to Carl. What do you think about this? You know about Taiwan's politics. Is it a red flag?
This is where I am, my optimist in me is going to come through again, because you right now is holed up in a bunker, being besieged, and he's trying to resist arrest. And this is a whole fiasco of a self-coup in South Korea. I mean, they had an elaborate plan. Apparently they were planning out back in 2023 to try to bring an escalation with North Korea in order to justify a martial law in South Korea. But what happened was Kim Jong-un, in completely contrary to how Western media depict him to be like a rational, crazy leader, Kim Jong-un said, you know what? We're not going to give them any excuses. We're going to blow up all the roads leading from North Korea to South Korea. So there's no way they can pin this on us. And so that's why South Korean special forces were forced to do this martial law without any justification. And it's become a farce. and 91% of the surveyed public in South Korea want Yoon Gang from the office of the presidency. So again, I understand there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of behind the curtain mechanician on the U.S. part and its puppets. But there's still a question of competence. I mean, South Korea, you cannot argue that was done competently, and Taiwan, knowing DPP, I don't think they can pull it off more competently than South Korea have done. And we still have. So, by the way, DTP they sent out a tweet during the coup in supporting of the President Yoon. Just like a lot of the right wing pundit like Gordon Chan. Gordon Chan is saying, "Oh, what happened in South Korea right now is a pro CCP faction. They're trying to take over." It's like, you kidding me? 91% of the public want Yoon Gang. I mean, like, these guys are clueless. Their only way of having any kind of currency in the United States is because America don't know anything about South Korea. Like, probably the only thing they know about Yoon is when he's sing American Pie to Biden in the White House. They don't know. So I'm not too worried about Taiwan. There's a couple of reasons. China right now is building up all the cities up on the other side of the Taiwan Strait. You don't do you don't do that unless you're confident no war is going to break out in near future, right? And right now, China, because let's remember the Taiwan Strait, that was the front line of the Cold War. So for about 50 years, the whole coastline facing Taiwan was left undeveloped. But that changed in 1980s, and right now China is slotting that whole zone for more development facing Taiwan. It's a great. I think it's great because it shows the people in Taiwan what can be accomplished. It's a good demonstrator model. And so if there all this Chinese investment is going in, I think China is pretty confident that there's not going to be war in 2027 like what U.S. Pentagon is peddling right now. And I think to drive that point home, China just flew 2 type of 6th generation fighter prototypes on Mao's birthday. I think the time is on China's side. Unless U.S. want to rush it to really push that trigger for war. In Taiwan's case, nothing will happen in Taiwan unless United States government give explicit approval and backing. There's no possibility of DPP going rogue here. They're on a short leash by United States. So it's whether U.S. really want to push that button for war. Right now, I just don't see it because Trump administration have way too much priority right now. They're going to Panama, they're going to Canada, they're going to Greenland. They want to turn the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America. There's a lot on one's plate. I mean, so I'm gonna take the optimistic approach and just a wait and see approach.
Well, I hope that you're right, Carl. And then since we're talking about Taiwan, this was something that we originally wanted to talk about this weekend, but then Trump was talking about Greenland, Panama, Canada, the Gulf of Mexico. I wanted to talk about this actually from the South China Morning Post. Why mainland China's Taiwan integration experiment in Fujian is starting to fizzle. And then at the same time, China's drive to give Taiwanese visitors local IDs alarmed Taipei. So which is it? Is it alarming Taipei or is it fizzling and there's no need for alarm? And I wanted to talk to, it's perfect that Carl's here. Also, Angelo spent time in Taiwan. He lives in China. So I wanted to hear I would like to hear both of your takes on this. This is kind of what you were talking about, Carl, this area of development. And it's a model for reunification with a complete reunification. What people don't even realize, I think, who are buying into the Taiwan independence movement and that China is a threat to Taiwan, is that the majority of exports from the island province of Taiwan go to the rest of China. And if they were to declare independence, their economy would implode. And there's no way for the US and all of their allies together to make up for this type of economic integration that Taiwan already enjoys with the rest of China. So, Angelo, and then Carl, what do you think about this and the way the media is kind of covering it? Just to put this out here, they claim that it's fizzling, but then when you read through it, it really doesn't add up to it fizzling. It really doesn't. But people could go check it out. Angelo?
Well, this when you look at, I think I look at the economical integration. That's one side of the de facto integration of Taiwan within China's economy. Between 40 to 50% of Taiwan's export goes to China. So that's one integration. And then there's a New York Times article that says that there's roughly, it's hard to know exactly, but there's between 1 to 2 million Taiwanese that live in the mainland. So basically, a lot of now the trend has completely changed. China used to be poor, the mainland used to be poor compared to Taiwan. Now it's the place, it's a new place. It's like people in the Middle West in the US, they dream about going either to New York or to California, because those are the cool places to be in. And also that's where opportunities are. When you look at Taiwan, it's a small island, there's not too much happening besides just TSMC. But even TSMC is moving out. They're moving out. They have activities now in Nevada. So it's a new cool place to go to. And I would say Taiwanese society is divided. There's the older generation. They actually do know that about their history. The new generation is divided, I would say, and it's geographically, the one in Taiwan are more pro reunification. The ones down from the south are more like, for voting for DPP. So, and I would say what worries me is a little bit about information space. You see more balanced voices has been completely shut down in Taiwan. So you see, when you look at all the medias, there are lots of foreign medias, but there's no more balanced media, alternative media. Or if you were to be pro-China, they easily shut you down. And in addition to that, the history book have been changed. So since Chen Shui-bian, I think it was in 2004, 2006, what the kids are learning is a new version of history. And so there's all this indoctrination, brainwashing from education to Hollywood to all those NGOs and National Endowment for Democracy also present in the island. So there's a slow hijacking of democracy. So it's a mix, but I would say the large majority is very clear. Large majority, even though they claim an identity of being from Taiwan. Like anyone, you go to Texas, people, they would say, oh, first I'm from Texas, and after they would say I'm from America, right? Taiwan is the same, but they're very realistic. They, very pragmatic. They say, well, we want status quo, because they know any change will lead to war. And they're very pragmatic. Deep inside, they are Chinese. I mean, Chinese are pragmatic. It's not much about ideology. It's really about tangible things. They're not interested about, ideology, that doesn't bring food on the table. So deep inside, Taiwanese are very Chinese, not only the outlook, but also, the mentality and the culture.
So I largely agree with what Angela said. There's a YouTube channel called Asia Boss. They go around all these different East Asian countries, and they do street interviews. And they had done street interviews in Taiwan, asking the young people there, what would they do if the People's Liberation Army were to come to Taiwan tomorrow? And many of the youth said, well, I would just wave the Chinese flag. I would sing the Chinese anthem. That goes to support your view, Angelo, that people in Taiwan are very pragmatic people. And as you also mentioned, the Taiwan's economy hasn't been doing well in the recent years. And for ambitious young people, who want better opportunity, many do go to the mainland China, not and not just working, but also to go to university, etc. This is why this China rolling out this new ID program for Taiwanese coming living in mainland is so alarming for the Taiwan government, because people they need to think for a second. Why would the Taiwan government be alarmed that their citizen will see the true condition in mainland China by actually going there, living there, and witnessing what's actually going on? Maybe because it will dispel a lot decades-old Cold War propaganda against mainland China. This is why I highly suggest any people who are interested, even the China haters, just go to China, see what it's really like. He may not be what you think it is. And this is what China is doing. It's relaxing travel rules. Now, most of the EU countries can travel to China 30 days visa free. And they're expanding that to even to UK and US. For you still need a visa if you're American or British, but now they have a 12 days a transit free a visa free transit visa. So which means if you travel through China and then go to a third country, then you can go to China for 12 days visa free. The idea is for people to come and see what China is really like, and they're pretty confident that it will either blow their mind or it will change what their perception of China is. And this is why they're rolling out this special program for the Taiwan people. And this is why now all these Western media come out with these insane articles, try to frame all these YouTube vloggers who travel to China as some kind of CCP propaganda outreach program. I mean, you got to be kidding me, man. Now it's not just now anybody can go to China and see for themselves. People can just do a quick search on YouTube. You will see tons of videos of people traveling to Xinjiang, to different parts of China, and but there will the Western prostitutes, still trying to do their best to pull a wool over people's eye. But we live in the internet age. I think people are starting to wise up to the fact that maybe they have been lied to. All these people who now mainstream media lost a lot of credibility in the West, right? But one of the problem is there's so much ignorance about China. A lot of the people, they know the media is lying to them about Russia, lying to them about Ukraine war, lying to them about COVID, lying to them about everything, but they still believe everything the media tell them about China, mostly because they just don't know any better. But I think, that's why I suggest people go visit China. Seeing is believing.
Carl, I heard you on another podcast. I think it was Shahid. He was talking about, you guys were talking about how during the first Trump administration, this is actually a Washington Post article from the first, and this is obvious. And Angela and I talk about this all the time. You get people in the comment section saying, no, we're not racist. It isn't racism, but it's 100% racism. Chinese people are not white, and they're surpassing the collective, all of Western civilization. They are surpassing it irreversibly, and they're freaking out because for centuries it's just been taken for granted that they're superior. It's to such a point that maybe they don't even see it as racism. They just see it as like a law of physics or something, that the West is superior. They call the shots. Everyone else is subordinated to them. They cannot come to grips with this. So I think we are seeing a kind of a meltdown. I think, yes, there are people in the middle who are going to go to China, or they're going to see videos from people who have gone to China, and they're going to open their eyes. But I think there's a lot of other people who are just deeply entrenched, and it's just something that the West, as a civilization for generations, has cultivated, a sense of superiority that far too many people have invested in, even if they themselves, they don't feel superior, but they feel like it's a bonus that, hey, I'm just born into this, and that's great. And they really don't want to give that up. So I don't know how much that's going to play into it, but you could see that is what Western propaganda plays to. And you can even see all the way up to the president and his administration. That is something that they're preying on. So this is, I think, is a very dangerous time. We've seen in history before how this type of rhetoric and how this type of framing gets a nation into a war, and all the damage that it can do. Do we have it? Because Angelo said he's got to keep it to an hour. If not, we'll just keep going on and on forever. So do either of you have any closing thoughts? And then if you don't want to stick around for question and answers, I think I have like 6. I will do that on my own. Maybe just give a final thought on this topic, starting with Angelo.
Yeah, well, I'd like to.
Go ahead, Angelo. I just need to open the door for my dogs. They're
Sure.
killing my door.
No, I would say it's very interesting what you just said before. Is out of hate, actually, they tend to embellish what the West is doing and actually to give justification to those aggression around the world. But in reality, and then I'd be talking to those racists, that those people that really think the West is better. In reality, if you really love your country, and I do actually love my country, it's, I sound, for people to say good things about China, they actually associate this of, oh, I'm pro-China and I'm against my country. It's not actually. It's the same as a family. You have a brother that you love dearly, but your brother is going in the wrong direction and he's going to hit a wall. If you love your brother, you are going to criticize him because you want him to do better. I want this brother to say, well, you see, they are doing well. Why don't you learn from best practice? I've studied NLP, neural linguistic programming. What you do is if you want excellence, you learn from the best. And that's what China's been doing. China's been going around the world and has been studying political system. And actually was influenced probably a lot by Singapore. But the idea is to be humble and to say, now, guess what? I want to be the best. I need to learn from the best. Now, love China, yes or not. But why don't you learn from China, from what it's doing right, and maybe you can apply this to your country. I'm not saying that you need to adopt China way and so on. No, you're too different, and China doesn't want you to adopt that. But if you really love your country, well, just don't drive your country into a confrontation it cannot win, and then start dealing with your own shit first. I mean, really, and actually what I'm saying is that really to those people that think I'm blindly following China and so on. No, I'm here and I see good things. And guess what? I talk to Chinese and they all tell me China is good, CPC is good to China. And the Chinese government needs to be good to Chinese, right? US government needs to be good to Americans. Now, if you look at all the polls, you study everywhere. Yoon, president in South Korea, 11%. Biden, senile, 30%. I mean, in the West, Trudeau, Macron, even less than Biden, those are failing. We are failing, and we want to export a failing system abroad. And I'm very frustrated because I see this good life, and I see tangible result. I see people, hopeful about the future. Really. I've seen for the last 30 years in China, people saying every time they're saying, my life is better. And guess what? My children's life will be better. In the West, in the US, life expectancy is going down. You know what it means? It means your children will live a shorter life than you. So much for human rights. And you look around. This is, I've been in the US 35 years ago. I went there to learn English and I used to love it. I had blasting time, but this is not the US I used to know really. And, and people, they need to really look at the reality. Are you living better? So why go into a confrontation? And guess what? It's not about ego. If you're an American and you are starving, right? You're in a survival mode. Your society is collapsing. Does it do any good to fight a war? Is that your ego? That's for your ego. But guess what? You know what? You need to be more pragmatic. You are going to be cannon fodder, and ultimately it's going to be you globalist elites that do not care about your country, because those people with money, they can buy another passport and they have 10 villas around the world. They had a villa in Malibu, but guess what? They have 9 other villas. It doesn't matter. But you are stuck in the Middle West, and those wars are not bringing you anything. So MAGA is a good concept, but the reality is different, So deal with your own country first. Yeah, I have to leave you guys, but a great pleasure. I'll be listening, just by while doing things. But Brian, Carl, good to see you, and let's do this again. Right?
Yes. Thank you for coming on as always. Thank you. All right. Carl, any final thoughts, unless you want to take on the question and answers with me, which you don't have to. Don't feel obligated. You're on mute, Carl.
Yeah,
Carl, you're on. All right,
yeah, I'm mute because of my dogs. I'll be here for the Q&A. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just go into the questions and answers, and then we'll have some final thoughts. Let's see here. So this goes back to the original topic. I didn't see the interview with Mike Waltz. I really very rarely listen to what American politicians say. I read the policy papers because that's what the politicians are just regurgitating and putting rhetoric in front of and around to sell to the American people, because that's what their actual job is. But he said described reasons for the takeover of Greenland. That means also a direct confrontation with Russia. I think we kind of answered that. It is definitely to enhance America's confrontation with Russia, not retreat away from it. Carl, you have anything to add to that?
I agree. No, I think we covered that pretty well. I mean, it's the whole idea of getting Greenland and Canada is to compete with Russia in the Arctic, and because now with climate change, now it's a new frontier, right? It's another rush to the frontier. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. How about this one? Totally unrelated topic, but kind of related. What will Israel do with the recent $8 billion from Biden? Well, the same thing it does with all money from the U.S. Buy weapons to kill people with all around the region. It is a U.S. proxy. That's what the U.S. feeds billions of dollars into. Between that and maintaining political control over Israel to keep it a belligerent, dysfunctional state instead of a state cohabitating with its neighbors, that's pretty much what they're going to do with it. Do you have any other ideas of what they might be doing with that money?
Same thing they always do. I mean, there's going to be zero change under Trump administration. If anything, Trump is going to be even more supportive of Israel and writing blank check to Bibi Netanyahu.
Yes, and then semi-related to that, Hamas, since Hamas is funded by the U.S., why does Iran help them while knowing that Hamas and any Muslim Brotherhood group are controlled by the U.S.? Well, they're not funded by the U.S. They're funded by Qatar, which is a U.S. ally, hosts U.S. troops. The U.S. launders money, weapons, support through its regional proxies, including Qatar. Iran attempts to make contact with these groups to pivot them toward a legitimate resistance organization, not because they're encouraging what they're doing currently, but to get them to do something more constructive for themselves and the region. I hope that makes that clear. Carl, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, Iran support Hamas because it's a Palestinian resistance group, not because it's Muslim Brotherhood or a proxy arms of Qatar government, right? Like the role they took on during the Syrian civil war, for example. They are supporting them just because they are right now the main arms of Palestinian resistance.
Yes, and because it would be difficult for Iran not to, because they want to support the Palestinian people, even if the resistance organization and center stage is more or less hijacked or being manipulated. Here's one. Could China do more at the UN to expose how phony the U.S. is? I think the U.S. is doing a good enough job of that on their own. What do you think about that? Is there anything China could do to enhance America's own efforts?
Trump is doing a great job. Don't interrupt him.
Yes, don't interrupt him when he's already doing more than enough. I mean, again, I guess that was kind of something that Angelo was talking about, how the U.S. is destroying its own credibility, and as time runs out and they get more desperate and they're rushing things, it becomes more and more obvious. It becomes more and more difficult, even for people that want to have hope in Trump. They really have to twist themselves into pretzels to explain what he ran on and then what he's doing before he even steps into office. How can we ask questions outside of this chat? I mean, you could always send me an email, but I'm probably more chances than not, I'm not going to get a chance to see it. If you support me on Patreon, send me a direct message. I read all of those all the time. I will get back to you on that. And maybe on X, if maybe, I don't know. What about you, Carl? Is there a way people can contact you or interact with you? Probably on X.
Yeah, just either comment on my YouTube comments. I read almost all my YouTube comments, or X. Yeah, shoot me a direct message on X. I'm not guarantee I will, but I try to read whatever direct message coming up in my way on X.
And then the last one, how can we better identify U.S. exceptionalism as racist imperialism? Don't people want to live in mutual respect among a community of nations? How does U.S. education, public and private, affect this? I mean, it's the history of the United States. They were born out of colonialism. They eradicated the indigenous population of an entire continent, and then they started conquering island nations all across the Pacific. And then they started a world war with Japan. Both of these nations were fighting over countries that belonged to neither one of them. And so, I mean, it's just baked into the process. And it's been continuous for generations now. It's so deep in the American consciousness that I don't know if there even is a way to address it or change. I mean, we try to do the best that we can in the alternative media to bring alternative points of view. But I mean, some people are just so deeply wired. What can you do? I mean, I'm sure, Carl, you face a lot of people who criticize your perspective and who call you a CCP shill, which is the Communist Party of China, CPC. They don't even know that much.
Xiao means I'm getting paid. I'm still waiting for the Xi checks to come through in the mail. But I think what happened is like you said, a lot of people, they grew up with all this propaganda. They grew up through osmosis, ingested this propaganda. So when you challenge their whole worldview, it's kind of like you're challenging their identity, and people get really defensive. That's why also as U.S. goes through decline, and China continue to rise, you're gonna see more and more copians, because that people will turn to more and more copian. That's the only area of production that U.S. still far surpass China, is a copian production.
That's why I follow you on X, because I want to read the cope in the responses when you post things about Chinese achievements. I remember talking to you, Carl. We were on Daniel Dumbrell's channel, and I was talking about when I was a little kid during the Gulf War. They actually had like baseball card style cards for the Gulf War. And we were like trading them with each other. And just think about how demented that is. Little kids trading cards themed on a war of aggression on the other side of the planet. So when you talk about osmosis, I mean, you're soaking in it your whole life from the moment you're born. And anytime you're consuming American media, it's amazing that anyone wakes up from it at all, honestly. I think that's it. Thank you very much, Carl, for popping on. Anytime that you see us doing a live stream and you feel like it, just pop up in the comment section. I'll send you the link. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Check the video description for all the places you can find and follow my work. And if you want to support my work, also, Angelo's information is there. I'll add your information too, Carl. I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere. And until any last thoughts, Carl? Any last words of wisdom you'd like to impart?
Invite me. I love to talk.
Okay. Well, next time maybe it'll just let you off the leash and a whole straight hour of Carl. I think everyone would really appreciate that. Including me. So, okay, thank you again. Everyone have a great day or night, depending on where you are. Carl, have a great evening. I'll talk to everyone soon. Bye.